So we're going to see if my 6-year-old grandson is smarter than a flat earther. About a week ago, I visited Try Thinking's channel. And Ryan on the island had left a comment saying that these globers have nothing. So I replied, Ryan, my question for you is, what is your #1 proof of a flat earth? As for me, I have made many observations that only work on a globe. Here are just a few, and I want to concentrate on #2. I currently live near the equator in Thailand, and the observed sun orbit is perpendicular to the Earth's surface. Continue that orbit path and the sun goes right underneath me at night. Again, not possible on a flat Earth, but easily explained by a globe. Well, actually, I got a reply from another Ryan Q Vincent. And he said, verify that the sun goes under you, ever. I couldn't think of a way to verify it, and I cannot believe that he said this. The observations are the same for the sun on a globe and a flat earth. So I replied with, I really don't think you have done much research. One of the fundamental differences between the flat and globe models is that the cosmos is above the flat earth and the cosmos completely surrounds the globe. Obviously, observations can only fit one model. And then I continued with, here is a video showing a sunset time lapse from Singapore, almost right on the equator, which is about 950 miles to the south of me. So let's watch this video. Now I found this on the internet, and I'll leave a link above. And you can see that the sun is setting perfectly perpendicular to the horizon. Now where I live in Bangkok, there is a slight tilt to the right as the sun sets. So it's almost perpendicular, but this is because I live farther to the north. Now remember, Ryan said, verify that the sun goes under you, ever. I couldn't think of a way to verify it. And my reply was, since the observed sun rises perpendicular to the horizon, passes overhead at noon, and sets perpendicular to the horizon at sunset, then it is not difficult to continue that same path and understand that it goes underneath you at night. And let's look at this a little bit different way. So we know that the sun travels 15 degrees an hour along its path. So let's say this is the sun 2 hours and 1 hour before sunset in Singapore. Now it makes absolutely no sense at all to think that the sun is somehow going to change direction just because it hit the horizon. So it's quite easy to understand that it's going to be the same distance below the horizon 1 and 2 hours after sunset as it was above the horizon 1 and 2 hours before sunset. Of course, Ryan only has excuses, and he goes, you said obviously observations can only fit one model. That is what you need to verify. You have to verify how you know the sun goes under you. You need to use timeanddate.com readings. They are taken from the real world. I replied with, having a case of cognitive dissonance because you can't explain those sun orbits on a flat earth. The data on both timeanddate.com and suncalc.org matches everything that I have seen. Doesn't Ryan even check his sources? So here's the data from timeanddate.com, and I'm picking March 20th, which will be the day of the equinox in Singapore this year, and that is when the sun is directly over the equator. So on that day, the sun rises 90 degrees east from Singapore. At solar noon, the altitude of the sun is 89 degrees, or almost directly overhead. And this is because Singapore is just a little bit over 1 degree north of the equator. And of course, the sun sets at 270 degrees west. So this is Google Earth, and you can see here is Singapore just north of the equator, and about 950 miles to the north is my location in Bangkok, Thailand. So on the equinox, the sun rises at 90 degrees to the east, It is almost directly overhead at solar noon. And finally, the sun sets 270 degrees to the west of Singapore. Now, as the Earth turns, that sun is going to continue to be directly over the equator. So it's not hard to understand that at midnight, it's going to be on the opposite side of the globe from Singapore. This also matches the data on suncalc.org. And what is nice about this website is on the top here, they have a slider for different times during the day. So it not only shows you the position of the sun during the daytime, it also shows the position of the sun at night as it's on the other side of the globe. So let's try this observation on a flat Earth. So again, here we have Singapore just north of the equator. Here's my location in Bangkok. Here is the North Pole up here. Of course, south is in the opposite direction. And then we have west over here and east over here. So here I've turned the map 90 degrees. And then I've lowered the observation height so we have a better perspective of what is going on. So again, the sunrise is 90 degrees east from Singapore. And at solar noon, the sun is almost directly above Singapore at 89 degrees. And the sun sets 270 degrees in the west. And I asked Ryan this question. You saw the sun setting perpendicular to the horizon in that video. So how does this sun return to the east to rise again in the morning 12 hours later if it doesn't go underneath me at night? Well, Ryan didn't reply to any more of my comments, but he was still in hot debate with another glober over equatorial mounts. And he says here, now prove that your EQ mounted telescope is actually following a star when it is pointed at the ground. You cannot prove it is doing that. And then down here, the EQ mount works perfectly well tracking the physically moving stars as they go overhead and vanish into the distance. So does Ryan really think that the sun passes overhead during the day and then at sunset it just vanishes into the distance? What he is not answering is how does the sun return to the east to rise again in the morning? Let's be honest, this is the most logical explanation for this observed sun orbit. So at night, that sun continues on the same path and it goes right underneath Singapore as it returns to the east to rise again in the morning. Especially since the sun should be orbiting above the equator on the equinox if the Earth was flat. So the reality is that this observed sun orbit cannot be explained by the flat Earth model. I also told Ryan that my 6-year-old grandson even figured this out when I asked him where the sun went at night. So one night he was playing with a flashlight, and as he raised the beam straight up on a wall, he says, "Grandpa, look, the sun is rising." So I asked him, "What about sunset?" So he ran the beam across the ceiling and down the other wall. And of course, this matches the sun that we see in Thailand. So next I asked him, where does the sun go at night? And he thought about this one for a few seconds. And then he ran the light across the floor. So this really shows how easy it is to understand the motion of celestial objects. My 6-year-old grandson was even able to figure it out. And it works no matter where you live.